Britain's failure to stand up for international law in Gaza is shameful, says Tony Blair's former International Development Secretary. We're going to read into a piece from Byline Times, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an article from Byline Times with the headline that Britain's failure to stand up to international law in Gaza is shameful, says Tony Blair's former International Development Secretary. Clare Short tells Keir Starmer's government to stand up for its principles and end Britain's role as a lieutenant by the United States. Guys, while you're here, make sure you hit the like button and share this across social media so others are notified of this video. And this is pretty much a reinforcement of the message that if you haven't got it through your head, let me reinforce that message for you if you're not already going to get it from this piece, guys. Britain is too scared to stand up to Israel. It's too scared of its big brother America. We're too scared to stand up on our own 2 feet and call out what is blatant breach of international law that Israel are doing. Israel have passed a law to ban the UNRWA. That's the United Nations relief agency out there. Sorry, I can't remember what the W stands for. And they are one of the biggest aid organizations in Gaza that have helped saved so many lives, so many Palestinians inside Gaza, and they have declared them as a terrorist organization for some reason, with no legal basis, no evidence whatsoever. This is the same Israeli government that did it, but not just obviously them. The Israeli parliament voted in this. It won't be till 3 months before the law becomes enshrined, but the fact that the majority of Israeli politicians voted for this shows you just how messed up they are, how insane their political they are. They really have lost their minds. They pretty much want to choke literally the life out of the Palestinians within Gaza, and the UNRWA are pretty much the lifeblood of what's trying to keep them going. It's tough enough for them already with aid struggling to get inside Gaza or almost cutting it off. It's like in places like, for example, in the north of Gaza as it is, but like literally, like when they announced the law, this ban on the UNRWA and declaring them as a terrorist state, do you know what the United Kingdom government's response was? The UK's government response was? You know what Labour's response was? We're extremely concerned by this decision. We're very worried about this decision. No, this is an outrage, or no, this is wrong, or no, what Israel are doing is shameful, or no calling out whatsoever. All they said was, we're concerned by this. You're concerned by this. We're very concerned by this. This was their message, to basically say we can't upset Israel. I know. It's ridiculous, guys. It's blatant ridiculous what they're doing. Anyway, let's read her piece here, guys. So as UK's influence and respect around the world has shrunk, our rhetoric has become more grandiose with constant claims of world-beating global leadership. But in the world marked by escalating crises, climate change, inequality, authoritarianism and conflict, Britain has failed to recognise how far international influence has diminished and has not yet come to terms with the fact that acting as a perpetual lieutenant to the United States of America is not an honourable or useful contribution to the challenges the world faces. Britain urgently needs to redefine its purpose on the world stage, and our current focus on increased defence spending, trade interests and arms sales is deeply insufficient. In our failure to stand up for international law in Gaza and Lebanon is shameful. Instead, we must prioritise issues that matter most: climate change, international health cooperation and sustainable development. To do so, we need to reverse the damage done to international development, a key pillar of Britain's role under the last Labour government. The Johnson and Sunak administrations devastated this legacy by slashing budgets and dismantling the Department for International Development, the DfID, which played a pivotal role in building global partnerships for development and sustainability. That joint effort reduced extreme poverty in the world from 1/3 of humanity to 10%, but very sadly is now rising again. The abolition of DfID by the Conservatives and the merging of development responsibilities into the Foreign Office was therefore deeply damaging. Given the context of the COVID emergency, when the government was spending an extra 400 billion on schemes to help the UK through the crisis, this destructive policy was clearly not led by the need to cut spending by an ideological hostility to development. The abolishment of the DfID led to a loss of valuable experience and signalled a shift away from Britain's commitment to international development. The Labour Party's reluctance to re-establish the DfID or even revive the Office of Development Assistance within the Foreign Office is deeply disappointing. Labour must urgently re-establish DfID as a cabinet-level department if it is truly committed to a joined-up international strategy for tackling the climate crisis and addressing global poverty. I absolutely agree with this. I think if Labour and Keir Starmer are very serious about, like, let's just give immigration for example, like, you know, there was a lot of rhetoric talk about it, and they are still using that rhetoric. But if they're serious about taking, you know, dealing with the source of where immigration comes from, and by setting this up, they can help reduce extreme poverty, which means that less people migrate. Of course, there are still obviously other global matters such as wars and conflicts that are being taken place around the world, which requires much more international pressure. But anything that would help reduce extreme poverty on a global perspective will also help as well, because it stops people migrating as well. You know, not everybody who comes to Europe or comes to the UK or goes to America goes there because they want to. They go there because they don't have anywhere else to go. Much of the disclosure from development frames it as charity, a moral obligation to aid the world's poor. While inequality is indeed a moral challenge, there is also a need to improve the balance of life opportunities across the world if we are to have any chance of creating a sustainable future. The changes are needed require much more than aid. A sustainable future demands large-scale investment in renewable energy, public transport, healthcare, education, and infrastructure. You also need trade agreements, environment agreements, tax arrangements, controls over money laundering, restrictions on arms sales, and a greater focus on conflict prevention and resolution. Funding is needed, but it is not just a question of how much. Money can be spent well or badly. The UK's aid budget, once used effectively, has been spread thinly across various departments and is often badly spent. The decision to fund refugees from development budgets mean that the spending on refugees is at the expense of the global poor. Moreover, UK funding should not primarily be distributed by UK NGOs, but whether possible to use to strengthen the system capacity of recipient countries, building their capacity to tackle their own challenges. There are too many actors in development. The current fragmented system, with each donor running its own programs, comes with a burden of excessive administration overheat, taking valuable time and resources away from the country's critical development work. All the poorest countries were in the recent past colonized and exploited, left with the government structures and economic arrangements which were distorted and undermined by an extractive focus of colonialism. Africa, the world's poorest continent, is particularly vulnerable. The UN projects that by 2050, Africa's population will double to 2.5 billion, constituting a quarter of the global population. The continent is already suffering the ravages of climate change, and this will only get worse. Mass displacement and conflict are inevitable unless we act now. We need a concentrated and well-organised international effort to help the continent prepare for the challenges that are coming, without the expenditures and influence of a dedicated development department. Britain is poorly positioned to contribute meaningfully to this effort. Moreover, without a strong advocate in cabinet and across the right whole for sustainable development in government, there will be no challenge to the FCO, MOD and intelligence agencies' fixations and deep entanglement in their roles as lieutenant to the US. Britain's reconciliation of its role in the world should not be about attempting to revive past glories, but it must be focused on finding the most effective ways to collaborate with other nations to address the world's pressing challenges. The urgent need to build a more sustainable and equality world order is daunting, but failure to act will endanger all of humanity. Britain can and should play a meaningful role. By focusing on climate action, development and international cooperation, UK can regain the respect of the global community and contribute a future that we can all take pride in. And I agree. We can be that again. It's pretty much, but our reputation has been tarnished after 14 years of Conservative, who really have ripped everything apart, ripped our reputation, ripped up and merged so many organisations within the government. They have literally destroyed Britain. They really did destroy Britain. Now, can Labour restore some of this? They may be able to. They may not. but we certainly are not the most, are certainly not as influential as we used to be. That is for certain. Being outside of the European Union limits our power as much as we used to have. We had a lot more influence then. That is one thing for certain. But that doesn't mean to say that we still can't play a role in the world. And I do believe that we can play more of a role in the world. And it's just about the will to do so. I'm sick of this premise that people have about like climate change or other issues, and they say, oh, because America or China are not doing it, we don't need to do it. No, it's about leading by example. It doesn't always have to be the case that if America starts something, we should follow. It doesn't have to be the case that if France or Russia or China start something, we should follow. No, it should not. Sometimes it's the case of if we start something, someone else may follow and pass, and vice versa. It should always be that. It should always be that we shouldn't always have to follow everybody else. But that is the direction we're sadly going at the moment. And I agree with a lot what Claire Schultz has said, especially about the role of the DfID. I definitely think, something like that definitely needs to be considered. But I don't recall it being mentioned, nothing like that being mentioned in the manifesto, Labour's manifesto at the time. And I don't recall, I haven't since then they come into power. I've not heard anything like that since, but maybe someone else can enlighten me down in the comments below. But what do you guys honestly think? What do you guys make of Claire Schultz's piece here? What do you make about Britain's position on the international stage? Not just obviously what's happening in Gaza and the reputation with Israel, but on the international stage, what you guys make of Britain's position. Let me know your thoughts and more down in the comments section below. If you found this video informative, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. Share this across social media so others are notified of this video. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing. It really does help support the channel. If you want to go one step further, financially support me and the work that I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.